Good morning, gentlemen. I'm going to talk today on a very different topic. You know that there's a big battle on in the Gaza Strip, but that is not my subject today. I'm going back to the battle in Ukraine. Why? Because recently in a meeting, I was asked by one of the participants, he said, Captain, there's a war which has started in Gaza, but what's going to happen to the battle which is already going on, the battle in Ukraine? What's going to happen? How is America going to face up to both the challenges? Because America is central to both these combats. Very good point. The first point is that Ukraine is a creation of the Americans. The battle has clear indication that America wanted to provoke Russia and have this battle. And I have a feeling all along, that Vladimir Putin was not interested in antagonizing America. In fact, he wanted a relationship with America and a setting up of a sort of detente between the two countries, because he wanted to take Russia forward. But the Americans did not want Russia to go forward. They wanted Russia to break like they had done in the earlier instance in 1992, when Russia had the old Soviet Union broke into 18 states, 18 countries, and now they wanted whatever was left of Russia to break again into another 3-4 countries. And thus they were expanding NATO eastwards, wanting to surround Russia, rather suffocate Russia. That was the plan. But there's an old saying, man proposes and God disposes. So the American plan actually ran into rough weather because of Hamas. Hamas, egged on by Iran, launched a massive attack on Israel, and the American goose was cooked because America was now got involved in 2 combat arenas in the world. America has already underwritten the security of Israel, and they have moved 2 carriers into the eastern Mediterranean. But what about Ukraine? Are the Americans going to say hands up on Ukraine, give it up and go away? That would be another catastrophic defeat for America after Afghanistan. Well, gentlemen, let's examine what are the options for America. The Americans have, as usual, been caught flat-footed. They were arming Ukraine with all sorts of weapons. Some of them could strike even Russian cities inside 600 to 700 kilometers away. They gave them the latest anti-tank weapons, and they gave them the HIMARS, they gave them everything, and they promised them the F-16 also. That's all very fine, provided there were no other hotspot in the world. And they were trying to placate the Chinese as far as Taiwan was concerned, and trying to drag India into the NATO to bolster their manpower. So, gentlemen, the question is, the American plans have failed. That's as simple in one line. If somebody asks me, I will say that the American plans failed. Russia proved to be more resilient, and despite all the sanctions which the Americans could think of, like taking them out of the SWIFT system and putting n number of sanctions on Russia, the battle has not gone in favor of Ukraine. All the weapons which they are given to Ukraine have not helped them win the offensive which they had launched. In fact, the offensive is pettered out, and now the Americans and NATO and the Western world, that the Western countries, are war weary. They wonder how long we're going to keep fighting in Ukraine. And perhaps they might have fought on in Ukraine, but for the fact that the conflict in the Middle East has come up, which is more dangerous than the one in Ukraine. So what is America going to do? is going to burn itself. And what happens tomorrow if the Chinese up the ante in Taiwan? What's going to happen? And America would be at three different places in that case. Gentlemen, the American leadership is basically defunct. That's the only thing I can think of. What America needed was a man like Roosevelt who could think straight and go ahead. But in fact, they got people like Joe Biden who didn't know which way the wind is blowing and who had no plan whatsoever of how to solve any issue. Under his leadership, there was a chaotic retreat from Afghanistan. America got a bad name because that came to be known as the mother of all retreats. You know what happened that way? The American soldiers went away first, leaving their spotters, the weapons, worth millions of dollars behind. Just went away. That's not the way to have a retreat. A retreat has to be an orderly, organized method of disengaging and going away, which the Americans probably were not ready for it. And they were just keen to get out of Afghanistan as quickly as possible. In that case, the Americans should have been very, very wary of trying to antagonize Russia. Because Russia may not be an economic power, but it is a very big military power with the biggest nuclear arsenal in the world. They have the strike capability to hit any part of America. And the Americans should have been wise enough to understand that there's no point in catching the Russian bear by the tail. I have been just wondering how short-sighted the American leadership could have been, that they have allowed the conflict in Ukraine to linger along for 19 months. They spent billions of dollars there, and so long as the Middle East conflict didn't take place, they were thinking everything's fine. And Joe Biden made a visit to Kyiv and he said, "We will support Ukraine as long as it gets." Easy to talk, sir, easy to talk. But it's very difficult to implement, and it's going to be more difficult even now, because America will have to prioritize what is to be done. Are they going to go whole hog in Ukraine, or they will do something in the Middle East? Gentlemen, the Middle East is a very, very dicey situation as it is, because it's basically almost about 20-30 countries in that region, and some of them are pro-America, some of them are anti-America, like Iran and Iraq and Yemen, and some are pro-America who have the military pact signed with America, like Jordan, Egypt, Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Bahrain, and America has its biggest base in Qatar. So America has got, I think, about 15,000 odd troops in the Middle East. So they have got to decide. See, because now they have a very belligerent power facing them, and that is Iran. I think the Iranians have a grouse, frankly, if you ask me, because if you look at history, it was the Americans who had foisted the Shah of Iran on the Iranian people in 1954 when the CIA carried out a palace coup. And then the reign of the Shah, Reza Pahlavi, was very, very despotic. He was a good man, he wanted to take Iran forward, but you got to see the type of civilization you are heading, because he was not like Kemal Atatürk, where the Turkish woman adopted the Western style of dress, skirts and shorts. He tried to do the same thing in Iran, it didn't work out. So gentlemen, Iran has had a grouse always, and they had taken almost about 50 odd hostages of the American embassy in 79 after the revolution, and kept them in custody for over a year, till Jimmy Carter had to give them a lot of money and then get them back. So gentlemen, the question is, America has had no strategic experience how to wield their massive military influence all over the world. They have come a cropper, and now the only power which is supporting them to a degree is England. And England is not a power, it's no longer Great Britain, it is Little Britain. Japan is on the side of the Americans, but Japan is no longer a military power, it's got nothing. And then they got Australia. While opposing them are very formidable powers. And two of them are Russia and China. And then there's that small imp, the devilish man, and he's Kim Jong, and he's in North Korea, and he's got all sorts of weapons with him. One of the favorite allies of America, that is Pakistan, has collapsed like a pack of cards. They don't know what to do now. And the Americans, who had an alliance with Pakistan since 1954 at the wit's end, because Pakistan is one of the most unreliable countries as things stand now. They are closer to China, and China is not the friend of America. That much should be very clear. Whatever trade is there, $600, $700 billion, is something which benefits the Chinese. It's continuing. But don't be under the impression that if there is so much of trade, the Chinese are very close to the Americans and they want peace or something with the Americans. No, they want to dominate the world. And so short-sighted are the Americans that they drove the Russians and the Americans into the arms of the Chinese. It's by their foolishness, they ensured that China would become the backer of Russia, and Russia and China are now in a monolith alliance. This shouldn't have happened, because if you remember, the French foreign minister Talleyrand, he served 4 kings, but he knew how to go about the nuts and bolts of foreign policy. And this is something which the Americans didn't know. You have got to play to your strengths, and this is what the Americans didn't do. Such a formidable military power, 700 military bases, 10 super carriers, and now looking more like Goliath. You know who Goliath was? There's a big giant who was killed with one sling by David. And then he also the Americans remind me of Gulliver. Gulliver's a very powerful man, but he's tied down by small, imps who tied him up, his hairs and everything, and Gulliver was left defenseless. He couldn't do a thing. So these are 2 examples from mythology which really come to me, and America has to really pull up its socks. That is why the 2024 election is now going to be very, very crucial. And if Biden wins, then America can say goodbye to world leadership. But there is a chance if Donald Trump comes into power, then maybe things might be a little better, because he's got a fresh insight. He brings something new. But he's facing so many charges, criminal charges, almost 60 or 70 of them, including something to do with giving hush money to Stormy Daniels, a woman. I won't say anything much about her. So gentlemen, this is all part of the game, all right, yes. But you've got to play the game by certain rules to see that America remains great. By just talking, we're making America great is not going to help. And America has to ensure that a semblance of justice is introduced in the Middle East, at least among the Palestinian population. There has to be a feeling that we are going to get some justice. As it stands, the war is going in a very, very gruesome manner. And of course, I'll say the fault for this war lies with Hamas. And probably Hamas may be on its last legs, or we don't know, but I'm not going to discuss that point here at the moment. I'm basically discussing the American approach. And America is embroiled in 2 different war sports in the world. And it's going to be very difficult for them to extricate, to come out of the mess in which they've created themselves. Gentlemen, I hope you like my channel. Share it to your friends. I look forward to your more and more subscribers coming in with you. And meanwhile, take care of yourselves. God bless till I come back again for my next video.